orient are bearing gifts we traverse afar. Field and fountain, moor and mountain, following yonder star.
The Gift of the Magi by O. Henry, written in 1906. Della stood by the window and looked out dully at a gray cat walking a gray fence in a gray backyard. Tomorrow would be Christmas Day, and she had only $1.87 with which to buy Jim a present. She had been saving every penny she could for months, with this result. $20 a week doesn't go far, and expenses had been greater than she had calculated. They always are. Only $1.87 to buy a present for Jim, her Jim. Many a happy hour she had spent planning for something nice for him, something fine and rare and sterling, something just a little bit near to being worthy of the honor of being owned by Jim. Now there were two possessions of the James Dillingham Youngs in which they both took a mighty pride. One was Jim's gold watch that had been his father's and his grandfather's, and the other was Della's hair. So now Della's beautiful hair fell about her rippling and shining like a cascade of brown waters. It reached below her knee and made itself almost a garment for her. And then she did it up again nervously and quickly. Once she faltered for a minute and stood still while a tear or two splashed on the worn red carpet. On went her old brown jacket, on went her old brown hat. With a whirl of skirts and with the brilliant sparkle still in her eyes, she fluttered out the door and down the stairs to the street. Where she stopped, the sign read, Madame Safrani, hair goods of all kinds. One flight up, Della ran and collected herself, panting. Madam, will you buy my hair? Asked Della. Buy hair, said Madam. Take off your hat and let's have a sight at the looks of it. And down rippled the brown cascade. $20, said Madam, lifting the mass with a practiced hand. Give it to me quick, said Della. And oh, the next 2 hours, she was ransacking the stores for Jim's present. She found it at last. It surely had been made for Jim and no one else. There was none other like it in any of the other stores, and she had turned all of them inside out. It was a platinum fob chain, simple and chaste in design, properly proclaiming its value by substance alone and not by mere ornamentation, as all good things should do. It was even worthy of the watch. As soon as she saw it, she knew that it must be Jim's. It was like him, quietness and value, the description applied to both. $21 they took from her. And she hurried home with the 87 cents. With that chain on his watch, Jim might be properly anxious about the time in any company. Grand as the watch was, he sometimes looked at it on the sly on account of the old leather strap that he used in place of a chain. And when Della reached home, her intoxication gave way to little prudence and reason. She got out her curling irons and lighted the gas and went to work, repairing the ravages made by generosity added to love, which is always a tremendous task, dear friends, a mammoth task. Within 40 minutes, her head was covered with tiny, close-lying curls that made her look wonderfully like a truant schoolboy. She looked at her reflection in the mirror long and carefully and critically. If Jim doesn't kill me, she told herself, before he takes a second look at me, he'll say I look like a Coney Island chorus girl. But what could I do? What could I do with $1.87? So, at 7 o'clock, the coffee was made and the frying pan was on the back of the stove, hot and ready to cook the chops. Jim was never late. Della doubled the fob chain in her hand and sat on the corner of the table near the door that he always entered. And then she heard his steps on the stairway down on the first flight, and she turned white for just a moment. She had a habit of saying a little silent prayer about the simplest everyday things, and now she whispered, "Please, God, make him think I am still pretty." The door opened and Jim stepped in and closed it. He looked thin and very serious. Poor fellow. He needed a new overcoat, and he was without gloves. Jim stopped inside the door, as immovable as a setter at the scent of a quail. His eyes were fixed upon Della, and there was an expression in them that she could not read, and it terrified her. It was not anger, nor surprise, nor disapproval, nor horror, nor any of the sentiments that she had been prepared for. He simply stared at her fixedly with that peculiar expression on his face. Della wiggled off the table and went for him. "Jim, darling," she cried, "don't look at me that way. I had my hair cut up and sold it because I couldn't have lived through Christmas without giving you a present. It'll grow out again. You won't mind, will you? I just had to do it. My hair grows awfully fast. Say Merry Christmas, Jim, and let's be happy. You don't know what a beautifully nice gift I have for you." "You've cut off your hair?" asked Jim, as if he had not arrived at that point yet, even after the hardest mental labor. "Cut it off and sold it? But don't you like me just as well as I am, anyhow, even without my hair?" Della asked. Jim looked about the room curiously. "You say your hair is gone?" he said, with an air of almost idiocy. "You needn't look for it," said Della. "It's sold, I tell you, sold and gone. It's Christmas Eve. Be good to me, for it went for you. Maybe the hairs of my head were numbered," she went on with a sudden serious sweetness, "but nobody could ever count my love for you. Shall I put the chops on, Jim?" Then Jim drew a package from his overcoat pocket and threw it upon the table. "Don't make any mistake, Del," he said. "And I don't think there's anything in a way of a haircut or a shampoo that could make me like my girl any less. But if you'll unwrap that package, you may see why you had me going at first." White fingers and nimbleness tore at the string and paper, and then an ecstatic scream of joy. Alas, a quick feminine change to hysterical tears and wails, necessitating the immediate employment of all the comforting powers of the Lord of the Flat. For there lay the combs, the set of combs, side and back, that Della had worshipped for a long time in a Broadway window. Beautiful combs, pure tortoise shell with jeweled rims, just the shade to wear in the beautiful vanished hair. They were expensive combs, she knew, and her heart had simply craved and yearned over them without the least hope of possession. And now they were hers. But the tresses that should have adorned the coveted ornaments were gone. But she hugged them, and at length she was able to look up with dim eyes and smile and say, "My hair grows so fast, Jim." And then Della leaped up like a little singed cat and cried, "Oh!" Jim had not yet seen his beautiful present. She held it out to him eagerly upon her open palm. The dull, precious metal seemed to flash with the reflection of her bright and ardent spirit. "Isn't it a dandy, Jim? I hunted all over town to find it. You'll have to look at the time 100 times a day. Now give me your watch, Jim. I want to see how it looks on it." Instead of obeying, Jim tumbled down on the couch and put his hands under the back of his head and smiled. "Del," he said, "let's put our Christmas presents away and keep 'em a while. They're too nice to use just at present." I sold the watch, to get the money to buy your combs. And now suppose you put the chops on. The Magi, as you know, were wise men, wonderfully wise men who brought gifts to the babe in the manger. They invented the art of giving Christmas presents. Being wise, their gifts were no doubt wise ones, possibly bearing the privilege of exchange in case of duplication. And here I have lamely related to you the uneventful chronicle of two foolish children in a flat who most unwisely sacrificed for each other the greatest treasures of their house. But in a last word to the wise of these days, let it be said that of all who give gifts, these two were the wisest. Of all who give and receive gifts, such as they are wisest. Everywhere they are wise. They are the Magi. The end.
Jesus is the reason for the season.